Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Smith, Chair of the TCHC's Board Governance, Communication, and Human Resources Committee. Welcome to this public session of today's committee, which marks the first hybrid GCHRC meeting at City Hall. I'd like to apologize for the delay. We had some technical difficulties, and hopefully this being the first meeting, it won't happen in the future when we have these meetings. Today marks this first hybrid meeting, and where we're meeting both virtually and at the committee room at City Hall. And members of the public have an opportunity to attend our meetings in person. Unfortunately, today I'm having to do this virtually. We will also continue to offer directors the option of attending the meetings via WebEx. As this process will be new to some of us, I want to remind those who are attending in person that it is important, if you're not speaking, to ensure that your in-room microphone is turned off. And if you are joining the WebEx application from the committee room, to ensure that the audio is disabled from your account. This ensures avoid feedback, which was one of the main challenges we were having a few moments ago. I'd like to start first by acknowledging that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual and in-person meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now the home of many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. During the public session, there is one presentation from Human Resources on TCHC's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion strategy, and two reports put forward for the committee's approval. The first report relates to the annual general meeting process for TCHC and its subsidiaries. It sets out the number of recommendations that the committee is being asked to approve. And the second report relates to the board and committee's meeting materials on TCHC's website. Similarly, it includes the recommendations that the committee and the board will be asked to consider and approve. The final agenda items are a report on the 2023 review schedule for policies requiring board approval, and a standing report on City Council's direction requiring board attention. With the move today to hybrid meeting format, we will modify slightly the process that we have previously established for voting during the course of today's virtual meeting. Members of the committee, whether attending in person or remotely, will be asked to vote by way of show of hands. Members of the public wanting to depute to an agenda item have the option to either submit a written deputation, which is distributed to the committee prior to the meeting, to participate in the meeting and depute to the committee via WebEx, or to verbally depute to the committee in person at today's meeting. We have, I believe, 3 deputations today, 2 in person or virtually, and 1 in written form. First of all, I'd like to ask committee members, would they let me know or show their whether the Governance, Communications, and Human Resources Committee, please indicate any agenda item which they may have a conflict of interest, together with the nature of that conflict. If anyone has one, please let me know. Hearing none, no conflicts of interest were declared for any agenda item. Approval of the agenda items. Everyone has received their agendas. Are there? If there are any items that anyone would like to hold in the agenda. Are there any items? We will be holding the two items where we have deputations. So those we will hold, but are there other items? The items for deputation are item 8 and 9. And I believe the written
I'd like to hold 6, please.
6, item 6. Okay. Any other items that anyone like to hold? Otherwise, we can have a motion to approve the public minutes from the last meeting and ask for approval of those minutes of the January 30th, 2023 meeting. So we're holding, as I believe I said, item 6, 8, and 9, Darren. So we need a motion for that first and then the minutes.
So, Mr. Chair, if the committee approves everything except items 6, 8, and 9, they'll approve the minutes as part of that motion. So just the one motion is required.
So Uba, would you like to move that? And a seconder, Councillor Chang, thank you very much. All those in favor? The motion's carried. So item 6 is the equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy, and I believe our Chief People and Culture Officer is going to take us through that, and then we can have questions once it's done. It was all part of your package that was circulated. So on, I think it's on page 15, starting on, well, the motion starts on page 13, but the report is on page 15 and forward. So Barbara, if you would like to start us on that, that would be great.
Thank you, Chair Smith. We have today we are joined by Kelly Schultes, our Director of Talent Management, and Jamie Kramer, our Senior Consultant, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And what we would like to do today is take you through a brief presentation that highlights our progress report on our EDI strategy, which was adopted last spring by committee. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamie right now to take us through the presentation, and we'll be happy to take your questions afterwards. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen and take you through this presentation now. So as a brief overview to our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategies annual progress report, I'll briefly go over our EDI strategy since I've already presented it here, and then get into what our progress was in 2022 and what priority actions we're going to be taking in 2023 before opening it up to any questions you may have. So to start, as you know, our EDI strategy is a set of actions and initiatives for all dimensions of diversity and is based on the results from the diversity and inclusion census and survey we ran, as well as best practices. The full strategy document is on our Toronto Housing website under our careers section. There are 4 goals that we're trying to meet under the EDI strategy, and we're doing so by taking those through 3 different phases. We're currently in phase 1, which is the internal strengthening of EDI, where we want to create more cultural competence in our leadership and staff to ensure awareness, understanding, and proactively remove barriers. We have 8 areas to address, which will lead to the outcomes of these actions, including things such as leadership accountability related to EDI, trust and respect between our staff members, management, and our HR department, as well as education, training, and awareness for all staff. To do a more thorough understanding of how our progress has been made, we're using 3 separate tools to measure and evaluate our success. The first is the maturity model, which we're using the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion benchmarks, which I'll talk about very briefly. We're also using action item specific measures to understand the success of individual programs and progress reports such as this, but others that we've given to our staff members throughout the past year as well. Just a brief overview of the GDEIB, since I talk about it in our update, but it is the global standards for equity, diversity, and inclusion work. There are 15 categories that you can see in the triangle on the right-hand side. And within these categories are 275 benchmarks set across 5 different levels. Level 1 is inactive and level 5 is best practice. And most organizations, including ours, are somewhere in that level 2 or level 3, showing that we're doing some progress, but there is still strides that we can be taking to be at that best practice level. When it comes to the progress we made last year, I want to just highlight some of the accomplishments we made. So on top of there is that we actually finalized and presented our EDI strategy to our executive leadership team here at the GCHRC and at the board. We also created an internal in-house page for EDI, and it hosts information on general topics as well as providing updates to all of our staff members. We also have a weekly human resources newsletter that I provide updates on the EDI strategy or EDI topics every week. And we also created a solidarity statement with the center to explain how EDI and the Confronting Anti-Black Racism strategy work together. We also became a proud partner with Pride at Work, where we cross-post our job postings, as well as we have opportunities for more 2S LGBTIAQ+ training. As well, we finalized a new framework for our employee networks, including a new guide for how new employee networks can be initiated, which is going through the final revision process right now. In terms of our first goal, which is to identify and address systemic barriers within Toronto community housing, we've created 2 toolkits, which will be launched very shortly to assist our managers with incorporating EDI into their daily work, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. We're also working on updating our policies with an EDI lens. So we've worked on refreshing our workplace diversity policy, our hiring policy, and our recruitment standard operating procedure. And we've also been drafting new policies to assist with meeting our EDI and CABR needs, specifically an employment equity policy and a human rights and socio-demographic data collection policy and procedure. And this is going to lead to those internal structures that support EDI and also provide us ways to identify systemic barriers in policies, procedures, and standard ways of operating. In terms of those toolkits, the first one that we've really been working on is about hosting inclusive meetings. So that provides our staff members knowledge for best practices for setting up meetings in an inclusive and accessible manner, taking them through things like our land acknowledgement and the African ancestral acknowledgement, but also what to look for if they are having in-person meetings, such as making sure that they're located in an accessible location, that there's room for people who have different disabilities to participate, and really making sure that everyone feels comfortable participating and listening to that feedback at the next time that we host a meeting. Once these toolkits have been launched, we will be getting feedback from our staff and our managers to see what other areas need to be addressed in these types of toolkits in the future, and that will help us create more leaders with cultural awareness and competency to lead their cross-cultural teams. For goal 2, that's creating programs to meet needs of our equity deserving groups. We've really been working with our employee networks throughout the last year to not only increase knowledge and awareness about them, but also to help for more membership opportunities. And as I noted, we've also been redeveloping our employee network framework and guide to starting an employee network, which should be launched by, I would say, June at the very latest. For goal 3, which is engage our diverse communities in a meaningful way, We've been working on communicating our progress to all stakeholders, including having presentations like this. But as I noted, every week I talk about different areas that we've been working on or different ways that we've been really achieving the goals that we set out in the EDI strategy so that our staff members have that knowledge moving forward. And goal 4, to attract and leverage a diverse workforce, we've been working on enhancing EDI on our public websites and career page. So really making sure that we highlight some of those EDI related topics and the EDI strategy there. But we've also added EDI competency performance measures to performance management and providing our leaders with tools and resources that they need to really add those to their performance goals moving forward. And we've been utilizing data to understand future hiring opportunities, specifically with our self-identification questionnaire, but also with the new policy that we've been writing as well. But last year, one of the big pieces that we worked on was having an inclusive open house pilot. So we had an open house for a specific position where the hiring managers came to us saying that they noticed that they were lacking a specific demographic within their division and that they wanted to try to target that demographic in the new posting as they went out to recruit for that position. So we worked with them on creating a 30 to 45 minute session where people could join a WebEx and learn about the division itself, the work that was done in that role, and how that division supports TCHC overall. As part of that, I created a guide to having those open houses, and the hope is that this year we utilize them more so that we can start to target some of those different demographics that might not have as much representation within TCHC. So in terms of the maturity model, which is that global diversity, equity, and inclusion benchmarks, I just wanted to provide some of those significant areas that we made progress in. And one of those is in category 1, vision, strategy, and business impact. We moved from level 1 inactive to level 3 proactive. We now have our EDI strategy, which provides us with a vision, mission, and business impact. But we also created a definition of EDI that goes beyond just that visible aspect to the non-visible, inherent, and acquired dimensions as well. We also made significant progress in category 7, work-life integration, flexibility, and benefits. This was especially done through some of the policies we already had in place, such as our religious leave and the way that we have flexible work, but creating our hybrid work policy also really helps cement this for us. And as well, in category 9, EDI communications, we moved to level 3 proactive. Our organization allows our employees to have their gender pronouns if they choose to on email signature or other written communications. We also provide accessible formats when necessary, and our EDI initiatives are promoted throughout different avenues so that people can learn about them as we continue to create successes. In terms of priority actions that we're going to be taking this year, we have 2. The first is education and awareness. So we're doing this through 2 separate programs. We're going to be piloting a diversity champion program, which is where we're allowing our staff members that already have some knowledge or who have already participated in some of the different EDI initiatives to get that next level of knowledge so that they can speak to topics in a way that they feel more comfortable in doing so and really start to promote and champion different ideas around EDI. And as well, we're going to be doing some Indigenous awareness training to give our staff members more knowledge about the Indigenous communities around us and why we do some of the things we do, such as land acknowledgements moving forward. And as well, we're going to be doing more with our internal socio-demographic data collection. As I mentioned, we're currently finalizing a human rights and socio-demographic data collection policy and procedure for TCHC, specifically for our staff members. And that is to build upon what we've done with the diversity census and inclusion survey that we ran, I guess, almost 2 years now, and really understand who we have within our staff team, who our candidates are, and how we can bridge the gaps to have more representation in the workplace. The goal is to have this done relatively soon. We are finalizing those documents, and then we'll be able to implement this and utilize this information for hiring programs and other data collection points moving forward. And that is the end of my update. So I will stop sharing my screen and open up to any questions that you might have.
Yes, I think Councillor Chang, you were going to have a question.
Yes, I have a few questions. Thank you for the presentation. Through the chair, I'm just wondering about the survey data from 2 years ago. Is that available for us to look at and And what was the percentage of participation across staff?
Through the chair to Councillor Chang, yes, when I presented the EDI strategy, which I know you were not here for, I did go over some of that information, and I'd be happy to send it to the GCHRC again for their reference. We had a 50% response rate across our divisions, and there's a breakdown of things such as ethnicity, unionization participation, gender identity, gender expression, all of those different attributes. And that's really what shaped how we've decided to move forward with our EDI strategy, but also it's really shaped that policy and procedure that will be forthcoming.
Did the survey ask questions about perceived obstacles or challenges, or was it more identifying the demographic?
It was both. So we asked those demographic and census questions, and where possible, tried to align them to Statistics Canada or other demographic data. But then the second half of the survey was, I believe, about 40 questions on the perceptions of inclusion. We broke that down into 4 categories. One was about gender, one was about sexual orientation, one was about experiences, which really highlighted that harassment and discrimination aspect. And then the rest of them, which was the bulk of our questions, was around what we call diversity engagement. So it was questions such as, if I brought forward a case of harassment and discrimination, I trust that TCHC would do what is correct, or my manager knows how to lead cross-cultural teams. And you can see from some of the areas that I've highlighted that we've really pinpointed the ones that we thought were most relevant or had those higher percentages of what we're calling neutral, so people who might have put it somewhere in the middle, or that lower end of, no, I don't agree with this, and tried to work on those over the past year.
Great. And were people able to participate in the survey anonymously?
Yes, it was all anonymous. It was done through a third party. And the way that it works is that if there's under a certain count, I can't see the information. So we had to get the consultant to send us that information so that there was no risk of having some of that private and confidential data compromised.
Right. And just wondering about the inclusive open houses, how were they promoted and who was the target attendee?
Yeah, so for the pilot that we did, specifically, we were trying to target a Black audience. We promoted and posted within the job description itself. It said something along the lines of, if you would like to learn more about this position, you can sign up for our WebEx, and then they were able to come to those. There was 2 separate sessions, one during a lunchtime and one after work, so that if people weren't able to participate during the day because of their current work, they were able to do so at a separate time. I believe, and Barbara and Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong, but we also posted to a paid website specifically targeting Black employees so that they would be able to see that if they were perusing those websites as well. And because we cross-post a Pride at Work, it was also posted there. And I believe we did it for an Indigenous site similar along that lines as well. So that even though it wasn't necessarily that, we heard from our hiring manager, we're missing this specific demographic, but our intention was, well, we might be missing others that maybe they can't visibly see. So let's try and hit as many different targets as we can using the resources we have.
That's great. And how many people attended the open houses?
I don't remember the exact amount, but I want to say it was it was 20s to 30s.
Yeah.
We could find out for sure, but it was a good amount, and we actually did end up hiring someone who attended the open house, so that was a success.
That's great. Is there any intentional outreach to newcomers? I think there'd be a lot of diverse candidates with very strong skills. I myself have interviewed several newcomers for a role in my office, and I feel like that it's a growing pool, as you know, with our current immigration policies. So I'm just wondering, yeah, that would be a really easy way to diversify our workforce by intentionally targeting the newcomers arriving.
Absolutely. And I think there's definitely room to grow with this. Since it was just a pilot, it wasn't something that came from us. It came from a different division and we rolled with it. But one of the areas that we're hoping to do by collecting this socio-demographic data on a more consistent basis is to be able to say to hiring managers, okay, we know you're missing X, Y, and Z. Why don't we try promoting to this specific group? It might cost you X amount of dollars, but now you have a bigger pool that is specifically targeted to what you're missing within your division. And then really encouraging these open houses, because sometimes job titles don't always match the day-to-day duties of what you're doing. But if somebody can listen and say, oh, well, you know, I wasn't expecting that job title to be exactly the skills that I have, hopefully we can get more people applying to those specific positions moving forward.
Right. And just one last question. Is there a parallel intentionality with EDI in terms of with tenants?
So tenants will be phase 3. We need to do definitely more consultations with our tenants before we're ready to do so, and making sure that we have the resources and personnel in place to be able to really work with our tenants and make sure that we're addressing their concerns in a way that makes sense to them. EDI is obviously a very broad topic, and there's a lot of demographics that fit into it. So we just want to make sure that we have the knowledge, the resources, and our staff are skilled, especially our frontline workers who will end up working with our tenants on a day-to-day basis. We want to make sure that they have the resources and knowledge necessary so that as we implement an EDI strategy really targeted to tenants, that they're able to answer questions without worrying about saying the wrong thing or always bringing it back, you know, to me. And then we want people to be able to answer questions as they come up in a more fluid manner instead of, you know, the standard 3 to 5 business day response wait time.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because they're also a great pool for hiring as well. And I think one of the challenges is the communication pathway. Not all tenants are on email lists that are easily accessible. And so it's, part of that open house strategy, I think should definitely include our tenants. Yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
Any further questions? I just have one, Jamie. How does CABR work in conjunction with this? How do they get involved with the strategy? Is it an ongoing process, or does CABR relate similar to other departments?
I can definitely answer that. So I work very closely with the CABR team on implementing a lot of these different initiatives, both from the CABR strategy and the EDI strategy. Especially when it relates to policies, we're working very closely together on making sure that it has the right lenses for that implementation. But really, anytime either of us get invited to a meeting, we make sure that the other is there so that we have both perspectives. But the idea is that EDI is that umbrella, and the CABR strategy is a more focused and targeted aspect to that we're really working on similar things, but from that different perspective. But we do work very closely together on pretty much everything that you've seen here. I've been working with them on that, especially around the education and awareness piece.
Yeah, of course, and I'm sure that's true. We obviously want both to be aligned with both EDI and CABR, that we're all moving in one direction, parallel or together. So anyway, any further questions? If there's none, then I'd like a motion to accept the EDI strategy annual report. A motion, Dara. So do we have a motion? To receive the report. So Councillor Chang, would you like to move that? Yes, and seconder, as I see, Aram. Great, thank you. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Our next item is item 8, which is the board committee materials, and we have two deputants, Catherine Wilkinson and Kathy Birch, who is going to do a deputation on this item. So sure who's on board. I see Kathy, so maybe I don't see Catherine, so at this point. So, oh, there you are. I see you now. You popped up. So why don't you start, Catherine? Your mic is on mute.
All righty, good morning.
Good morning.
So I wanted to speak to this report with regards to the recommendations. The first one is to restore all available public meeting materials from January 2004 to December 2011. As previously mentioned by Councillor Fletcher, there was no need to remove those 8 years of files as they did not have to be converted. They were exempt from being converted into the AODA format, and that's confirmed in the report before you. AODA is the law. The board's decision to remove public board and committee meeting materials to avoid compliance fines was clearly the most expedient and cost-effective decision at the time. The second recommendation is to remove non-compliant meeting materials from January 2012 to December 2020. That will result in permanently removing an additional 9 years of institutional memory and decision-making from the website. Any materials can only be accessed by the public upon request. This means for an unspecified period of time, the only thing that will be on the TCH board website page from 2004 to 2020 is agendas. Although the matter went to BIFAC in 2021, this compliance matter originated at the governance committee as it falls within their mandate in 2013. The city manager sent a letter to the CEO outlining expectations and guidelines to comply with AODA legislation. There were various timelines of compliance as the AODA standards were being rolled out. The committee directed management to include AODA compliance in their annual compliance reporting. 2 years later, in 2015, the committee requested the annual compliance certificate address areas of compliance beyond financial compliance. In 2016, the CEO committed to expanding the items on the annual compliance certification and will certify compliance with AODA and MFIPA reporting requirements going forward. So that's the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and MFIPA is the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Sorry, I used acronyms. The board did its due diligence by directing management to report back on the timelines and include AODA compliance reporting on their annual certificate of compliance. In the BIFAC board reports on this matter, there was also a recommendation to permanently remove all board and committee meeting materials over 1 year old from the website. As these materials are official public records, that is just not acceptable. Is permanent removal of public records and materials of this corporation acceptable to the shareholder? Management is aware they have not been in AODA website compliance for years. The board was not. Toronto Housing failed to provide the board with annual AODA compliance reporting. They did not act quickly to mitigate the risk. And here we are 10 years later, up against the AODA website deadline of June 30th. As noted, AODA maximum fines for corporations not in compliance are up to $100,000 per day. And for directors like yourselves and officers of the corporation, the fines are up to $50,000 per day. At this point, we are forced to remove existing materials in their current format. There's no option. Of course, there will be significant costs attached to doing that. How does this conversation we're having impact stakeholder access to future meeting materials in advance of meetings? I have 3 recommendations for the committee. The first one is to ensure there are appropriate steps put in place to protect the shareholder, the corporation, its directors and officers from ever being put at risk again due to non-compliance by the corporation, be it financial or otherwise. The second one is that management should provide the annual compliance certificate beyond financial requirements. That includes AOTA and MFIPA reporting or other appropriate agencies or legislation. The third one is the city provides meeting agendas and reports from 2012 forward. As we are an agency of the city, Toronto Community Housing should find a way to do the same and commit to a timeline to permanently restore board and committee website materials. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Does anyone have any questions for Catherine? Dara, after, maybe I'll hold off until Kathy has done, because I'm sure she has some similar questions. So we'll ask Kathy Birch to make her deputation on this item.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning. I'm here to talk to you about AODA compliance and the responsibility over what's available on our website. I want you to know this has been an issue for at least 5 years. So this corporation has known the issues for years, and one of the reasons we are here now is because of the inconsistency in this corporation. I'm very aware that Dara and Paula have inherited this problem because, quite honestly, since I started RPath in 2013, you know, we've had 6 CEOs and staff have changed at even a faster pace. So although you're responsible for it now, I also want it to be known that we're aware of where it started. And now we know that it's not been budgeted for. I will say that RPath did talk to communications back in 2017, and we had set a plan forward that they would put, they would go back to 2015 and that those would be made compliant right away. And there was a strategy that as soon as those were compliant, they would work backwards to make the previous years compliant and get them up on the website. Unfortunately, none of that was budgeted for or was completed by previous management of the comms team. And if there's no money, like, this doesn't happen out of nowhere. And the lack of compliance and the lack of follow through has to be held accountable somewhere. These are public records, and we as tenants count on them because, quite honestly, we've got CEOs and senior management that are inconsistent as far as there's a constant turnover. And as soon as there's a turnover, some of the information doesn't get transitioned on. So when things come up, we as tenants go out on the website and we start looking for the agendas, the board reports, and the materials so that we can advise our senior leadership team, don't do that because we did that back in the, and here's the reports that prove it and it didn't work. So if these materials are not available, then we're not being able to get the information because we as tenants have more institutional memory than most of the staff and management. These are public records. I have talked to Paula. I'm not sure if they've gotten the city's blessing to remove permanent records permanently off the website. I don't know that the city would do that because I will tell you that I personally went on to the city's website and picked a I picked 2012 as a year, and I went to the city's website and pulled up their March minutes, their agenda, the reports, all the materials, and the minutes for that council meeting. So since the city is making sure that their website has all the stuff in AODA compliance and up and available to the public, why would they allow Toronto Community Housing as one of their corporations to not provide that? And as far as, and I know Paula's gonna say, there's a, minimal traffic. So here's my counter to that, Paula, and please excuse me, but don't excuse me. The reality of it is the city's website's a lot bigger than ours, and I bet you money there's a lot more spaces that have no traffic than what we have. So the lack of traffic is not a reason to not get in compliance. And it's not a reason to not have the materials up on the website. There's been many times I've sat in RPAF meetings and said, is there anything else we need to talk about? And it has not come back that we need the money for this, because I would have been glad to advocate for it. And why has our staff not gone to our city councilors? If you don't have the money, go to the city councilors, ask the city for a one-time, budgeting, so that you can get in compliance. Don't brush it under the rug. And if it's out of sight, out of mind, and therefore the problem doesn't exist. Now you're under the gun because enforcement's enforcing the deadlines. So now you're saying we have to take it off the site because nothing can be in there on there that's not compliant. That sounds like a deliberate way to not, that's creating barriers, period. Because that means that you've got people with vision impairments who are not going to be able to get to documents as well as everybody else. Like I said, I've personally pulled up agendas, reports, and minutes, and there's really no excuse for this to not have been done. There really isn't. But now you're sitting there, and as part of the report is that oh, well, this corporation could be up to $100,000 fines per day. Isn't that awful? We can't have it, so we got to get this stuff off. Well, you should have gotten it done before this as well and budgeted for it. And if you didn't have the budget, so where's the due diligence? Where's the responsibility? And where's the accountability for it? We need the materials on the website. They need to be there complete with reports, materials. If the city can do it, do you think they're really the city manager? I don't know. I can't remember what you told me, Paula. If the city manager has approved this process, and that, I find it hard to believe that they would, but I'd like to see some plan and a strategy and a commitment, and for this committee to enforce it and make sure that they do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Questions for both on the same area, either sure you can direct it either at Kathy or with Catherine. So any questions? I don't see anybody, but so I will ask my question. And it's actually not to Kathy, but it's, I guess, to Paula. In terms of putting forward, in addition to the recommendations, because obviously we are sort of up against the time that we need to comply. but whether we could add another clause which would lay out a plan with a timeline for bringing us those documents into compliance, and the cost related to doing that, because obviously it may need to be done over a period of time, and also to have some reaction or some feedback from the city about their ability to provide resources to facilitate this, which must be true in all their arm's length corporations. And I don't know how many of them are in the same position as we are or not, but I would guess there may be a few, especially those that have been in existence for some time, maybe not the newer ones who have not got a long history. But is that something we could add to the motion, Paula, that would be achievable in terms of laying out a plan for the documents to be put in compliance, and with timelines and costs related, and to have a further discussion with the city around helping us facilitate that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll also ask Dara to jump in as well. And thank you, Ms. Wilkinson and Ms. Burke for your comments. Just to clarify in terms of the report, the content for the January 12th to December 20th will be put back on the website as it relates to the agendas and the minutes. The direction is then, should somebody want the materials that are attached, they could make the request. So I just wanted to clarify that piece. It's the agenda and the minutes. I think it was referenced that it was just the agendas, but recognizing that might not fully address the concerns that have been raised. We're also transitioning to a brand new website, which will be soft launched in April, which is why the information that is not compliant will be removed temporarily, so that we can actually put that remediated content, the agendas and the minutes, back on in July when that goes into live, the full launch at the end of June, beginning of July. So that's the plan for that. What we haven't been able to address is the attachments, and that is because they're quite extensive, and the cost to do that is prohibitive. And as Ms. Birch actually did indicate, the business decision was made based on traffic to the site. We know that less than 1% of all visits to our website actually go to the board pages and the actual reference documents that are being referenced. The cost of mediating all of those attachments, we believe, will be based on quotes that we've received, will be in excess of 500,000. So obviously the decision was made to not proceed at this point to that, but to definitely make those that content available. Should somebody go to the minutes and say, oh, I'd like that report, they can make the request, and within 5 days that would be made available in AODA compliance. With that in mind. So that's the direction we've gone. To your comments, Mr. Chair, we can certainly follow up with the city again as it relates to supporting us. They have a much bigger team at the city from an accessibility perspective that may be able to support us in terms of doing some of that work on our behalf, as they are for the city. We haven't pursued that at this point. We've simply had the guidance as it relates to the work we're doing this far. And Dara, I'm not sure if you want to add anything else to my comments in terms of the findings of this report.
I would echo the comments that Paula's made. The only other piece that I do want to flag, there was a mention that the recommendations in the report were considered by BIFAC. They were also considered by the board at its meeting of June 2021 and adopted by that time. So the strategy that has been the subject of more recent concern, and I understand the nature of those concerns, was something that was presented to the board at that time. This report brings back alternatives to address access to those reports, reinstate the earlier documents, and provide a mechanism through which those small number of individuals who would like access to the supporting reports beyond the agendas and minutes that will be on the website and accessible to all can obtain access to those documents should they want to have it.
Thank you. Any other questions? I guess the only other question.
Sorry,
either
Councillor Chang has her hand up.
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry, I
Chair.
didn't see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Chang, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm wondering, currently our meetings, are we putting our attachments through, are they being presented through AODA compliant, or is it still only the agenda and minutes?
Do you want to answer that, Dara? Or?
So part of the recommendations before the committee are to ensure that any new material that goes up to the website is provided in a compliant format. Governance staff are working with staff from Strategic Communications to ensure that that's the case. And we're also working with report writers to ensure that the material that they provide to us for the board has gone through an initial examination by their staff so that we receive it in a compliant manner. So yes, the short answer is the plan is that going forward for existing material, anything after the date that's outlined in the report, I believe it's 2020, January of 2021 would be AODA compliant.
And so that means that some documents will have to be retroactively adjusted, is that correct?
That's correct.
So is there a budget associated in terms of what that costs so that moving forward, we have an idea of what the cost of compliance will be on an ongoing basis?
So I believe that the reference in the report is that we estimate that it will require approximately 300 hours of staff time to effect remediation of the reports for the period of January 2021 to present, and it may result in the incursion of some vendor costs associated with that. And I think the number that I have heard, Paula, correct me if I have it wrong, is that it's roughly $7 a page for a vendor to make the documents compliant, but we'll mitigate that cost by having staff engaged in the process.
So what I mean is new documents being created, so not retroactive remediation, but what is the cost for new materials that are being generated moving forward?
So I'm not sure if we can tease that cost out, but essentially what it would require a staff member to do when drafting a document in Word format is to apply features of the Word application to review the document and ensure that any compliance issues are addressed. We're going to continue to provide the documentation to the board and to the website in PDF format. There are similarly compliance tools that exist within that software that we can rely upon to further check that the conversion process from Word to PDF format doesn't eliminate or doesn't affect a previously compliant format. And then we'll work with strategic communication. It'll be part of our internal processes as we post everything to the website. There won't be an additional cost that we track. It'll just be part of our natural process going forward.
That's great. And I just wanted to clarify the city, there's still parts of the city that are not there yet. An example is our community consultations for new developments. The materials are not posted online because they are not compliant. And so I'm working with that division to see what it will look like. But currently, any community consultation that happens does not get posted online because they're not compliant. So just wanted to clarify that the city, probably there's still a lot of places where we're still in process.
Thank you. Any further questions? So, so I'm not sure if there are any changes to the motion, but I'd like to have a motion to approve the recommendations contained in the report regarding the board and committees meeting materials on the TCHC website. So if I could have a motion on that. Thank you, Councillor Chang, and I have a seconder. Uba, you're the only person I can see that's here, so I'll move seconded by Uba, and ask, oh, I see Moran or Naram now. So all those in favor, motion is carried. So the next item is item 9, a review of the schedule of policies required by board approval. And we have a Deputant, Catherine Wilkinson, who would like to speak to that. So Catherine, you're.
Yes, so I'm speaking to item 9, the 2023 review schedule for policies requiring board approval. It is usually an industry best practice to review company policies every 2 to 3 years. In some cases, new policies are triggered by changes in legislation at shareholders' request, or for new programs that are coming about in the strategic plans. When this report came before the Governance Committee in the past, historically, it actually included the policy inventory list. So the committee members were able to see all of the policies of the corporation, and it identifies the areas of responsibility and also including board and committees and the timelines to the policies were to be reviewed. I notified staff they did not include the attachments and was advised that these attachments are operational in nature and intended for staff use when implementing the framework. I will say there's nothing proprietary about a list of the corporation's policies. When a significant issue rises or there is an investigation, the first thing the board will turn to is the existing policy to determine if the policy or procedure in place adequately meets the needs of the corporation. Tenants are to be consulted on policies that have an impact on service standards or the level of services. This is a requirement of the shareholders agreement. That has not happened for years. While a policy may require board approval, operations has the discretion to make administrative changes, and in so doing may inadvertently bypass the tenant consultation process. An example of this is the TCH eviction prevention policy for arrears. Approved by the board in 2002, management tweaked it a couple of times after they added some new information on the arrears collection process to the policy. That may have been well intended, but as we know, the arrears collection policy procedures have been changed at least 4 times while you people have been on the board, or some of you. And unfortunately, those changes are not reflected in the actual policy itself. So when you're embedding operational information into a policy, the policy itself would need updating, which means it would need to go before the board for approval. So that didn't happen. The website actually says the eviction prevention policy is up for review in 2016. So with few exceptions, each time an investigation or audit has taken place on Toronto Community Housing, it identified the need to review and revise existing policies, revise procedures, or to even create new ones. This could be through the ombudsman, the auditor, or the shareholder, and we'd be expected to do this within specific timelines outside of our control. The policy framework is a standing item on the annual governance committee work plan. It hasn't come forward as an agenda item for the past couple of years. Outdated policies can have very serious consequences. They can result in reputational risk, yes, but they can also result in legal challenges for the corporation. Committee members today are being asked to postpone another year reviewing the corporation's policy list without the benefit of actually having a list in front of them. So I'm going to say it might be helpful for the committee members to actually be provided with a copy of the existing policy inventory list to allow them to do their due diligence, to review it, and to make an informed decision. If they, as directors of the corporation, are comfortable in postponing review of the corporation's policies for another year. Thank you.
Questions? Anyone have a question for Catherine? I hear none. Paula, do you want to speak to this motion?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you so much. So thank you so much for your comments, Ms. Milkinson. A lot of what you say is accurate. We are actually, the report itself is to speak to the fact that we do need to do a review. The last time we did a review of the process itself was 2018. As you know, that was before my time. So I have asked my team to go back and to review the process we have as it relates to how we review policies, when we review policies, the criteria in which we review policies. So that's the report you see in front of you is directing that. We do have a list of current inventory of policies, which I'm happy to bring back to this committee. We do have a number that need to be reviewed pretty quickly, and we are in the process of doing that. But that, the report is really to speak to the fact that we need to review our process and the steps that we're taking to actually do that.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for Paula?
I do. So
Yes. Thank you, Jane.
thank you through the chair. Thank you for this report. So I just want to clarify, we have a plan to make a plan. And in that time, are there, I guess, red flagged items that are still going to be reviewed, or is all the resources and energy going to be focused on making the plan to identify the flames that might be burning already?
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for your comments and your question. There are no red flags currently. We have gone through the current list of inventory to make sure that we're not at risk in any way. And we are, as we're reviewing the policies that are currently from a timeliness perspective, we're also then going through the process of reviewing our kind of the overall way in which we do this as an organization.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to add and to address a comment made by the deputy, the policy framework was reviewed by this committee in September of 2020 and again March of 2021. It wasn't reviewed last year. And the only, in respect of Councillor Cheng's question regarding policies that, notwithstanding the framework, will be reviewed, the deputation policy is going to be reviewed this year as a consequence of the direction that was previously given in relation to the need to review that policy.
Just the other comment I might make, if I can, through the chair, not all policies come to the board. Many of them are reviewed at the executive level or within the business. So our list of inventory includes all of those policies, not only the ones that will be required to come to the board.
So do we separate between operational policies and organizational policies, or ones that need to be approved by the board? Do we separate the two? Or do
Yes,
all
we do.
policies?
No, through the chair, we actually do, we categorize them in terms of whether they're operational, organizational, whether they need to come to the board, and there's different criterias attached to the way in which we review each of them, and the framework that is attached to the actual report outlines those steps that we take depending on what kind of policy it actually is.
I just need to flag for the chair that we're going to lose the room in about 2 minutes. There's some very nice people from York University who have the room booked for noon.
Okay. Okay, we'll do it quickly.
Either...
So just my one little question. We have that the fourth quarter you're going to bring back a set of recommended policies to be reviewed in 2024. So we'll put that on our action item list, perhaps, so we can track that as we go forward. So if there are any further questions, otherwise I'll look for a motion to approve the recommendations contained in the report. So, Naram, can I have a motion unless there's other questions? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Uba, thank you. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And I guess since that is our last item, I will ask for, unless I've missed something, we'll ask for a motion to terminate the meeting. Is that correct? We can terminate? There's
that's
no
correct.
further business? Great.
No further
So
business.
Uba, could you move that motion? Thank you. Councillor Chang, would you second that termination? Thank you very much. Again, I'd like to apologize for our technical difficulties at the beginning of the meeting, but we'll try to make sure that doesn't happen